of Treasury Consulting LLP, and today we would be covering a dedicated topic which is risk management practices hedge accounting. As you very well understand that we are living in a world when market is changing very fast. We are living in a world when risk management is something which is the top priority of every corporate, whether that is the big companies like ExxonMobil, which is the largest producer of the oil of the globe, which is the big producers like Saudi Aramco, which is like Microsoft, Google, or anyone. Risk management is something which is the top priority for any corporate. And nowadays, the harsh reality is that we are moving in a world, we are in fact living in a world when the margins are very, very thin. In fact, for a big companies, without quoting the name, they are operating at a margin of approximately 10% to 15%. And we very well understand that how markets are going. Markets are changing at a very faster pace. Currencies are swinging like a cricket ball. It's just like a cricket ball. GBP, Euro, Indian Rupee, Philippines Peso, Aussie Dollar, New Zealand Dollar, they are the currencies which are swinging more than 6 to 7% in a year. And that to either side. If you take an example of Indian Rupee, in a year you will feel that more than 7% of appreciation and more than 7% of depreciation. I will not mention about GBP and Euro because for them changing two big figures in a day, one big figure which 100 basis point and 1 basis point is 0.0001. So for them changing two big figures in a day is a very small thing because this is their nature. They are the most volatile currencies of the globe and sometimes also known as volatility gauges also. In that regards, hedging your exposure is something which is very, very relevant. Because even the companies like Google, who are operating not on 35, 40, 50% of margin, except a few cases like Tesla, who are having more or less a monopoly in electric cars, to an extent Microsoft, having monopoly in operating systems, they still have little bit amount of margins. But that doesn't mean that they are going to take their foreign exchange exposure open. Similarly is the case of the Facebook. Similarly a case for the Apple, who more or less have monopoly on their product. But that doesn't mean that the monopoly will continue to stay, and at the same time they have to hedge their exposure at a in a wonderful way. So hedge accounting is something which is very, very relevant and something which we have to do. Now in that regards, if we talk about the big companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Accenture and all, they have a huge amount of exposure which is subject to hedge. Hedge documentation play a very important role. We all understand that IFRS 9 is changing its nature every day. I don't know, since inception, IFRS 9 is being changed more than several times. And in fact, practically speaking, with due respect, almost every day you're getting one or another update for IFRS 9. It's almost very difficult for even people like us, those who hardcore consulting companies in hedge accounting, to basically have a track who is changing what, how, and in what respect. If you talk about big companies, they do have the following exposures. Example, account receivables, both local currency and foreign currency. Accounts payable, both local currency and foreign currency. Interest rate swaps, exotics, local currency deposit, NSFR, which is bank net stable funding ratio. This is something which is biggest debatable point as of now in Europe. I'm not sure how many people who are watching our videos really take a track on what changes which is happening. But NSFR is something which is a highly debatable point as far as the European banks are concerned. You take my words. And of course, from April 2018, something which is going to be the biggest debatable, and we are expecting a lot of videos to be coming next week on that topic, which is ECL, expected credit losses. Expected credit losses, something, nobody knows which model to use. And we are going to have in our fixed income platform, which is round the corner, is we are going to have ECL on the way. We would be having ECL on the way. There would be dedicated ECL desk in that regards. Now in this I want to talk rebalancing exposure, which is something I will talk later. But three important things which are very, very important nowadays is the NSFR from bank's point of view, and especially as far as the Basel III is concerned. ECL, expected credit losses, and rebalancing exposures. How it will impacting? It impact balance sheet, it impact P&L, it impact cash flow statement, and something which is coming very nascent nowadays, something which is not in talks too often, which is OCI analytics. Other comprehensive income analytics. So there was a time when other comprehensive income used to treat as a place whereby all the gains and losses provided you are effective in the hedge is going to be there. Translation gains and losses, superannuation gains and losses, stock comp, all non-cash expenses to be there. But now we have seen a change in the trend. The big companies like, without quoting their name, they have started doing OCI analytics. They try and compare OCI analytics. I'm writing here. They try and compare OCI analytics with one thing which is known as reclassification adjustment. So example, if I am the CEO of the Facebook or Google or Microsoft, I love to do so. I wanted to see that my company is pretty big and at a such big scale, how much OCI I would be having. And OCI won't be small, right? In this OCI, how much reclassification adjustment entry is passing through every year. Reclassification adjustment, for those who do not understand, is an entry which is being passed pertaining to the current month's gain and losses. So ultimately it's a reversal of OCI, basically that part of OCI, and there are two entries. The first is the reversal of the OCI. So if there is a OCI gain, that would be P&L debit. If there would be a OCI loss, that would be P&L credit, because it's a reversal. And then pertaining to these amount of hedges, whatever gain and loss you would be having, that gain and loss will come and hit the books predominantly in either side of the P&L. It could be debit or credit, depends. You have reclassification adjustment in a positive or in a negative way. It depends, to be honest. From where the exposures are coming, it comes from customers, it comes from projects, it coming from finance cost, it coming from factors, it coming from banks, it coming from syndicates. These all are exposures would be coming. Hedge accounting, something which is very relevant. IFRS is a principle based approach. US GAAP is a rule based approach. I do not want to comment on IND AS, but you understand what I meant to say. IFRS, without quoting anywhere, stressing on a quantitative hedge accounting. On the contrary, US GAAP also without mentioning anywhere, talking about qualitative hedge accounting. All those American companies, those who have US GAAP, you will feel that more focus is on the qualitative hedge accounting, like shortcut method, critical to terms method. And all companies, those who are on the IFRS, they are more or less quantitative hedge accounting, which is dollar offset, regressions, long haul method, hypothetical method, and dollar offset for options. There are few things which we should understand very carefully before moving further, exactly what is quantitative hedge accounting and what is qualitative hedge accounting. And before understanding that, we should understand two things common, which is basically what is economic relationship and what is hedging relationship. If today I am ExxonMobil, what I am doing, I am producing oil. Now if I have my own oil fields, I would have capex, machinery, plant and equipment, salaries, and so on and so forth. Salary is not a capex, basically this is OPEX, operating expenses, machineries, and all such IPRs, intellectual property, and so on and so forth, to be honest. On the other hand, if I am leasing something, then I would have more capex and OPEX also. I am going to hedge it. Now this is the hedging relationship. The reason being, I am going to hedge this commodity, I don't know. Example, all the oil companies, those who are drilling, Saudi Aramco, ExxonMobil, Reliance and all, they are buying a huge amount of pipes. They are not the pipes which we are using in our household. They are very dynamic in the sense, very precision based pipe, because that is going several kilometers down to earth from where they will take out the oil. So I was blessed to give a training to an oil company a few weeks ago, and I got to know that how the oil is getting drilled, and I was even fascinated to know that when they drill the first pipe, in a pipe there is a pipe, and within two pipes there is a pipe. So there are four pipes. In the fourth pipe the oil is coming. So basically, so that in case of any quake and anything would have happened, earth would shake, there won't any break. So there are three layers which protect that that oil, and fourth layer himself is that the pipe of that oil. Now they are buying that pipe. To buying that pipe, for why they are buying the pipe? Is Reliance, ExxonMobil, Saudi Aramco and all, are they buying for their homes? Are they buying to sell it to some other companies? No, they are buying to drill. So there is a hedge relationship, that the cost of buying can be hedged because this is for your business. Now there is an economic relationship. Now what is the economic relationship? The economic relation, there is a critical difference between economic relationship and hedge relationship. In a hedge relationship, we need to see the business model. Now Reliance, ExxonMobil, Saudi Aramco and all the big companies, Unlocal, Petronas, Chinese, PetroChina, they all are buying the pipes because they need to drill. So they can hedge that. What is the economic relationship? They are buying only because they need to sell oil. This is economic relationship. So either it's a qualitative hedge accounting or a quantitative hedge accounting. Both economic relationship and hedge relationship should be there. Hedge relationship is something that has to be documented, which in technical term is known as hedge documentation. Hedge documentation is something, unfortunately, there are many people who still believe that hedge documentation is something which is more or less common. No, that is absolutely incorrect. Hedge documentation is something which vary from instrument to instrument. So if somebody is taking swaps, somebody is taking options, somebody is taking forward, somebody is taking futures, somebody is taking FRA, forward rate agreement, and so on and so forth. Hedge documentation differ in all aspects. And hedge documentation keep changing. The reason being, if you talk about swaps, it's a very generic thing. There are millions of types of swaps which we have across the globe, and all type of swaps work in a different way. Now the moral of the story, can I have a common hedge documentation in place? The answer is completely incorrect. We cannot have a common hedge documentation in place. The reason being, it's not going to be worked. Now once we go to these hedge and economic relationship work both, but as far as the qualitative hedge accounting, they are the only thing, because there is nothing mathematically you are calculating. It's all theory. So that is why all those companies, those who are in the US GAAP, they are more or less on the qualitative hedge accounting. When we talk about quantitative hedge accounting, we have a method called dollar offset, regression, long haul method, hypothetical method, and dollar offset for option. One of the contesting points which we have in IFRS 9 and still not being decided is the hedge accounting for options. Because options, I'm writing here, options fair value, there is no space left. Say fair value is nothing but time value plus intrinsic value. Although IFRS 9 is not allowing time value to come in the P&L, they are allowing time value to come in OCI. On the contrary, the intrinsic value will come in the P&L if ineffective. On the other hand, in US GAAP, you can do hedge accounting for the options either on time value. In that sense, intrinsic will go in OCI if effective. You will do on intrinsic value, time value will go in OCI if effective, or you can do on the fair value. So as far as this options is concerned, there is something which is a lot of action which is happening. There is no common, common setup which we have as of now. A lot of debates are happening. Big fours are in the race, and everybody is saying their own version. My version is that US GAAP is right. In case you have an option, it should be intrinsic value or extrinsic value. It's up to you. If you're taking on intrinsic value, extrinsic value, which is also known as time value, should go in the P&L. If you are taking on time value, it should go in the P&L. Now, as far as the quantitative hedge accounting is concerned, one important thing which we should understand is the dollar offset method. There are a lot of debate which is happening across the globe, and there are many multiple companies to whom we are doing the business as far as the valuation of the dollar offset is concerned. Believe me, the biggest problem in the dollar offset is the denominator, which is the present value of the hedged item. And this problem will get aggravated when we do on compounding basis. So the standards are saying that there is no need to do on monthly basis, but that doesn't mean you can't do that. You can do that. But If you're doing on a quarterly basis, but quarterly basis is something which is mandatory, and if you're doing on a quarterly basis, then you should be adding. So example, quarter 1, cumulatively quarter 2, cumulatively quarter 3, and then quarter 4. So you would be adding that, to be precise. The biggest problem is the denominator. Another is a regression. Fourth is a long haul method. We have so many companies, those who have swaps. But the biggest problem which we have, when they do the hedge accounting, they will do on dollar offset. They do not know that, boss, in swaps, the only method which is being advised to do the hedge accounting is the long haul method. Long haul method is a specialized method in swap. I'm not saying that you cannot do the dollar offset. You're most welcome to do the dollar offset, but the biggest thing to do is the long haul method, because this is specially devised. So if there is a pill which is devised for headache, you cannot take the pill for any other reason except headache. If you have headache, you are supposed to take that pill. So this is how. One is the hypothetical method. This method is being predominantly used by banks, and banks like Goldman Sachs and others. Why Goldman Sachs? They are the one who are the leading creators. They are the market makers as far as the derivative is concerned. Since they are the market makers, there are a lot of hedge accounting issues which they are be facing. And since they are creating a derivative, let's talk about SSS, spread sensitive swaps, which is being invented by Goldman Sachs. In that, can you do the hedge accounting using dollar offset? Impossible. Nobody knows. Can you do using regression? No. Is a long haul method applicable? To an extent, but we're not sure. The reason being, this is a new kind of swap. There are a lot of things which are coming. There are a lot of credit options which are coming. Buy side credit option, put side credit option. So it's very difficult. Which method? Hypothetical method. Last is dollar offset for options. You have non-deliverable forward or deliverable forward. Dollar offset. One is come to option, non-deliverable option or deliverable option. You should use that method. Dollar offset for option. Take my words. Dollar offset, before moving further, you first have to see whether, boss, you have dollar offset, your hedging item, hedge derivative is a forward contract or option. That too deliverable or non-deliverable. Last but not the least, there is something which we should talk about rebalancing of exposure, which we left. The reason being, IFRS 9 is having a very wonderful thing which US GAAP 157 and 133 do not have, is the rebalancing of the exposure. In this rebalancing of the exposure, rather than binding, so what is rebalancing is that in US GAAP, if hedge relationship or economic relationship do not stand true, you need to wind it up. You need to wind that hedged item. The OCI, if effective, will get reversed, and there would be a reclassification adjustment, and then you can take the fresh hedge. Now, taking a fresh hedge is something which is the hands of the central bank, because in a country like India, you cannot wind even a current account transaction more than 1 year. Of course, the practical scenario is something different, but as far as the theoretical framework is concerned, this is that. But in IFRS 9, we have something which is known as rebalancing of the exposure. In rebalancing of the exposure, how exactly it happens is, without winding up, you can rebalance both the denominator and denominator. In denominator, you can rebalance the hedged derivatives. In denominator, you can rebalance the hedged item. This is something which is very good, and there is not much change that would be happen in the hedging documentation. The last thing which I want to talk about is the impact of credit risk, is the rebalancing of the hedge ratio with Greeks, and Greeks would be coming using options, and rebalancing of the hedge ratio without Greeks. This is with options, this is without options, and this is hedging relationships. Last but not the least, unfortunately, US GAAP do not talking about credit risk. Take an example. Today I am serving for an American client, without quoting the name, and assuming that American client is winding up. Business is not doing good, nothing good is happening. Now, if they're winding up, what would happen? I would be in mess. I have already taken a forward position against that exposure. The client is saying, I'm not winding up, but I'm in a stress, so the money which would become later. I'm not talking about window forward or participating forward or various other forward techniques, but for a while, I need to rebalance my exposure. I would love to take a CDS on my forward contract. Credit default swap, maybe I will take first till default swap, nth till default swap, total return swap, asset swap. List is endless. Moral of the story, did we ever thought, I have a client, he is in a stressful position, not being able to pay to me. Was my simple question, where this credit cost would be going? Even if you are taking CDS, first till default, end till default, so-called first till default, end till default, so-called TRS, total return swap, asset swap, there is a recurring cost. Where this recurring cost is going? Is this going in the PNL or it is going in the OCI? Which hedge accounting to be used, quantitative or qualitative? This is something which is rebalancing while taking credit cost into consideration. Unfortunately, US GAAP do not talk about that, but now since the market is getting a lot of stress, without quoting the name, big companies are winding it up. A lot of companies like last week, the Volkswagen again into a scandal. Another Japanese firm like Mahindra, something like that, I may be wrong in spelling the name. After Mitsubishi, they are again in scandal. Where is the credit cost? Think about it. This is something US GAAP is talking about. IFRS 9 is talking about. So IFRS 9 is coming up with a concept which is rebalancing of exposure, and at the same time it's coming up including the credit risk into consideration. So this is the complete gamut of hedge accounting. In my personal opinion, hedge accounting is something which is very prevalent for any company. But unfortunately for most of the companies, without quoting the name, they are not being to hedge accounting. I think hedge accounting is a long process. IFRS 9 is still to settle, and I think by the time it will settle before 2018, April 2018, the date from where it will get effective, there are a lot of new things that would be on the way. I think that the company should start thinking about IFRS 9. If not, it's going to be the big mess for the companies. Currencies are swinging like a cricket ball here, there. So, and the margins are pretty limited. Today, we are not living in a world when we have endless margins, 35%, 40% and so. So, think carefully in that regards. And not to mention, before winding up this video, our fixed income platform is just 10 to 12 days round the corner. Our fixed income KPO lines in open. It's 91, Indian number 11, which is Delhi number 401999774. You have a mobile 9899242978. While my Skype ID is Rahul5327. My mobile is rahul.magan@treasuryconsulting.in. You're most welcome in case of any questions, and we are heading towards 500 YouTube videos probably by 15th of January, and approximately 800 videos by 2018, and hopefully by 2019 we would be touching 1000 videos, and we would be covering diversified topics. Thank you and have a wonderful time ahead.